Rev up your engines! Simar says, I know you're not a big fan of modern BMW. What are your thoughts on BMWs made in the early 2000s? That's when they started to go downhill quite rapidly. 80s, they were great. 90s, and then they started in the 2000s. They are over-engineered. Plastic piles of crap with computer stuff everywhere. Even in the early 2000s, those Beamers had plastic everywhere. You might think, well, it's just a plastic piece. Then you find out, oh, this little German plastic piece on a BMW cost $800. And you got to take half the engine apart to get to it. So they weren't that well made. 80s and early 90s, they were probably the pinnacle of BMW. Really, for that they lasted and could run a long time. Then they made them speedier and handling even better, but man, they made them with much more planned obsolescence in them too. Santino says, what's your think about a BMW E29 as a budget daily? It depends on what your budget is. You better be a rich man because they break and they cost a fortune to fix. Doesn't matter what BMW you buy. Now, I mean, if you live in Europe or something, there's a lot of guys who work on them. There's a lot of junkyards with them as they break. If you don't mind a guy using junkyard parts, I know people in Europe, including Great Britain, even though it's an island off of Europe, that have BMWs, they say, well, we got guys that work on them and they give us a good deal and they know how to work on them. Here in the United States, guys who specialize in BMWs and the dealers would just stick it in and break it off. They are the most gouging mechanics in the world. That's just how it is. They got to buy all this equipment, have to have all this training. They're going to spend it on you. So unless you live in Europe, it's not a budget. Unless you've got an endless budget, in which case, go right ahead. JP says, Scotty, I bought a 17 Honda Ridgeline, had the front struts replaced at 76 Cadillac. Is this something that's happening with all of them, or am I the lucky one? Not really. Depends on how you drove it, where you drove. I've had customers with those with the 140,000. They're still on the original ones and they go okay. If you hit a lot of potholes, go off-road and stuff, yeah, you're going to wear them out faster, right? The other thing is, there's a lot of crooked mechanics out there, right? Every time you come in, oh, you need struts, you need struts. This is my son, Norton, Massachusetts, and the guys were trying to screw him over, telling him his 3-year-old Toyota needed work and it wouldn't pass the inspection because their machine wouldn't read it. Well, I went and brought mine, plugged in and read it perfectly fine. So I went with them and said, here I am. Now, the owner of the shop didn't know I was, but one of his mechanics did. So he paid whatever it was, $39 or whatever, to get his car inspected, and it passed. But I listened, and the woman in front of him had a 2-year-old Chevy pickup truck, and they told her she had to replace all the shocks on the thing for a whole bunch of money. When it was only 2 years older, they couldn't pass it for the inspection. So Sridhar says, Scotty, what do you think of a Lexus LX 570? It was 177K miles, 2011, with a 5.7 V8. Excellent made vehicle. It's got 177,000 miles, and it's a V8 Lexus. When they do start to break, any car's going to break eventually. It's got 177,000 miles on it. It costs a fortune to replace it. I'll give you an example. I had a customer with one. The brake master cylinder went out. Couldn't buy the brake master cylinder, had to buy the whole assembly. The whole assembly was $1,850. My wife's Lexus has a V6. I can get a master cylinder for that for $140. Less than 1/10 of the price. Parts are insanely expensive on those, and they're really hard to work on. That's got a V8 engine. You got to take the intake manifold off to change the starter. You're going to pay over $1,000 to change the starter. Eventually, starters wear out. Everything wears out eventually. You got to decide. Do you want to buy a car that's got heavy maintenance like that with that kind of mileage? They are excellent cars, no arguing that, but they're super expensive to fix when they break. Jonathan Bing says, what do you think of an FN2 Type R Honda Civic? They are screaming little race cars. I've driven them, had fans with them, and they are a scream to drive. But there's one real problem, and that is you're going to drive like a maniac because they're race cars. You're probably going to get a million tickets, so you might kill yourself. If you want that kind of speed in a car that size, that's the one that you would buy. Realize one thing, though. Road test one if you can, because they ride like race cars. Bangity bang, the fillings in my teeth can come out when you hit potholes. They are made for racetracks. They're not made for everyday driving on regular roads like banks, like bang. I would never get in one of those and drive cross country. You'd probably be half dead by the time you got there because it's a race type car. But if you want a car like that, that would be the one to get. It's not an everyday driver. You want an everyday driver, get a Civic Si. They're still pretty zippy and they got a better suspension system for smooth riding. They won't corner as fast as the Type R, but they'll ride a lot better. Steve Kenner says, Scotty, what kind of Jeep should I buy? An old one and fix it up. The new ones are crap. Ever since Fiat bought out Chrysler and now it's Stellantis, they're making garbage like the Jeep Renegade. Isn't a Jeep, it's a rebadged Fiat 500 four-wheel drive vehicle. Piece of crap, right? The older Jeeps now, if you want the most modern Jeep that was still a decent Jeep, go when it was Daimler Chrysler. Because when Mercedes owned Jeep, they actually made them a little bit better. They started to go up. They put some of the really good trannies made in Austria there. They really improved them. But then Fiat bought it and went, right down the toilet. Get an older one and fix it up. The new one's garbage. UJet78 says, 1999 Mazda Miata. What are your thoughts? They're fun little toys. If it's a standard transmission. Their automatic transmissions are garbage. They're no fun to drive. I wouldn't even buy one with an automatic, and they break. They cost $4 or $5 grand to fix. But if it's a standard transmission, those are fun cars to drive around. It's an old car. Lots of stuff can go on, so don't pay much for it. If a guy like me, check it out. But they can be really fun little toys to drive around. Dylan's Awesome says, my dad bought a brand new Toyota Camry this summer. Dealer said to get the first oil change at 10,000 miles to the special oil. Is that true? Yeah, they tell you that, and then they tell you, oh, well, it's normal for them to burn some oil when they get older. I don't care. I change mine every 5,000 miles. I do not care. Oil is cheap and engines cost a fortune. On the other hand, if you're going to do highway driving a lot, you could change it every 10,000 miles because highway mileage are only equivalent to like 10% of city driving if you're driving a regular highway. I'm not talking about on the highways of Houston, Texas and rush hour traffic when they're going 10 miles an hour and stop and go. I'm talking about going 65, 70 miles an hour straight for hours and hours. That's only 10% of the wear. So you could easily go 10,000 miles between changes. But stop and go city traffic. Hey, oil's cheap. Learn how to change your own. Do it every 5,000 miles. You'll be happy. That's what I've done. You know how many engines I had to put in my own cars? None, because I take care of them. Mine don't burn oil. I get people all the time, bring me cars. My car burns quart oil every 1,000 miles. The dealer says that's normal. I'm not going to do anything about it. And it is if you don't change your oil enough. Now, if you get a really crappy car, and like a Fiat, I've seen them, they burn a quart of oil every 1,000 miles when they're brand new. They're just not built right, and there's nothing you can do about that. James McGraw says, Scotty, where are you going to be in April? Love for you to look at my '08 CRV. Well, if you're around Rhode Island, I'll be in Rhode Island, April, May, June. So contact me then, and I'll set up a time. I'd like to check it out so people can get honest reviews of cars. Not some BS somebody's paid to say, oh, this is a great vehicle, blah, blah, blah. No, I love seeing owners of the cars. It's a 14-year-old car. I love it to show people what did you spend, what broke. Did I get my computer out and analyze it, see what shape it's in? I love to do that because it helps everyone out. Honest reviews with no BS attached. Black Zone MC5 says, Scotty, what do you think of a Toyota Avalon 2004? Some of those had problems with the power steering rack leaking. Some of them had problems with the cam seals leaking on the engine. Get a history of the car. If it's had the rack replaced, you don't have to worry about it. But do check the rack. Go to the jack it up or crawl under when you turn it. Where the tie rods move the wheel on the left and the right, there's a big boot. Squeeze it. If fluid comes out, it's leaking, don't buy it because it's very expensive repair. And make sure the engine isn't leaking engine oil because those cam seals leak. But a lot of guys had to have them replaced under warranty. So have that checked. And if otherwise, it can be a great car. Now, it's an '04. So what are you talking about? 18-year-old car. It's an old car. You do want a mechanic like me to check it out. Engine could be going out, transmission, anything that old, you never know. But they were really solid cars and they came out aside from those 2 leaks that they have. So check those first. Brad Hill says, Scotty, I had 4 Dodge Dakotas and all 4 frames rotted in half. I've got something to say to you. They say, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Well, you were fooled 4 times, so who are we going to blame on that one, you know? They just make them cheaper and cheaper. If you live in Michigan or, Buffalo or something, they put so much salt on the road. It just eats the heck out of the stuff. And I talked to guys in Rhode Island, and they were really because originally they diluted the salt a little, but then they started using pure salt, and it just rotted them even faster, and the people got mad about it, but they just kept using it because it was cheaper to use the pure salt, or so they didn't care if it rotted the people's cars. Planned obsolescence, right? Joseph Albanese says, what's your opinion on a 1987 Cadillac Brougham? Personally, I think Cadillac Brougham 87 was one of the ugliest cars ever made, but what do they say? Beauty's in the eye of the beholder, right? They were better made back in the day. They were more solid. The trannies didn't break. The engines, big old V8s could last forever. It's a phenomenal gas hog. There's no arguing that. It's an 87, so it's a dinosaur mobile. What do we got here? Oh, you got a 35-year-old car. That is an old car. If you want a toy and you want to play around with it, just realize, unless it's a convertible, it's worthless. It'll never be a collector's item. It's convertible. It's worth putting some money in, fixing it up, have some fun with it. But it's a hardtop you want to buy. Don't put too much money in it because it'll never be worth anything. Julian R.A. says, Scotty, do you think the Civic Type R is more reliable than German hot hatches? Well, it certainly is. Honda makes probably the best 4-cylinder screaming engine out there. They really know how to make them, right? The German stuff, it can go fast and stuff, but it doesn't last as long. Just the entire philosophy. The Civic Type R are a special thing Honda makes, and they make sure those babies are built right. The Germans are just mass producing theirs, and they're not as spec specific as the Civic Type R's. I mean, you can get a German hot hatch a lot cheaper, that's for sure, Honda is just, it's the pinnacle of a little bitty racing car that you can buy. If you can find one, they're going for so much money now. There's no way a German one would outlast it today. Now, of course, a lot of it depends on how you drive. You buy a car like that, you might drive like an absolute maniac, and you run into something, or you rev it up so high eventually, any engine will blow if you keep revving it as high as it can go. But all things considered equally, the Japanese one would outdo the German ones by far. Bo Smith says, Scotty, you're the greatest. Well, maybe I'm the greatest Scotty. You know, I can't say I'm the greatest person. I'm nowhere close to that. But when it comes to the people with the name Scotty, I might be the best Scotty, you know? Let's face it. Basketball, Scottie Pippen, he was a great basketball player, but I mean, that's throwing a ball in a hoop. And he was really tall, which makes it easier, right? So, I may be the greatest Scotty of all time. You think of Scotty from Star Trek, but he was just an actor who portrayed engineer on a very corny TV show that just got a cult following after a time, with William Shatner, the great Shakespearean actor, hamming it up. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.